Hey everybody, in today's video we're going to begin building our grapple hook feature, but before we really get into that, what we're going to be doing is building all the basics that we need so that the feature can function. So that's things like new grapple obstacles like this stream, little objects that the player can grapple onto, as well as the assets that we're going to need for the grapple hook itself. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own AARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. Alright, so before we can build this grappling hook, we need to kind of look at the game and kind of address a couple issues. So let me go ahead and just run my project here so you can get a sense what I'm talking about while I describe it. But currently, when we switch to the grapple hook, we're going to have it so that the hero shoots the grapple hook out. If it runs into an object like the wall or something, maybe it just hits it and bounces back. But if it hits something like maybe this door here, however, because it's wooden, maybe we want the player to be pulled to it. And in addition to that, we're going to want to have certain grappleable, like grapple point type objects in the world. And so we'll build like a little wooden post that the player can grapple to. But we also need terrain that the player cannot cross that's not a wall, because if the grapple hook hits walls, what are we going to be using the grapple hook to traverse? And so what we'll do in this example is we're going to add a really rudimentary stream of water that the player can't walk over. We're going to add a new collision type that works to block the player but is separate from the walls so that we can kind of distinguish between the two. So we're going to have in our tile maps, we're going to have our walls or our objects that, we already have that block the player, but we're also going to add grapple obstacles, and so these are areas that the player can't cross unless he's being pulled by the grapple hook. And then the third type of collision object that we'll add to our tile maps and to our objects are the grapple points. Okay, so the first thing I want to do before we begin adding assets or anything like that is I want to go into our physics settings and I want to give names to some of the layers that we're going to use to do this. So let's go into project settings, and then you can just go ahead and type physics into the filter here. And you'll see we've got 2D and 3D. So we want the 2D physics. We want it down here by layer names, not physics. So layer names for the 2D physics. That's what we want. So what we're going to do is we're going to add, remember, we're going to add new layers. So we're going to have a layer for grapple obstacles and another layer for grapple points. And so what I'm going to do, because the grapple obstacles are like walls, I'm going to put them on layer 4 so that they're next to each other in the list. And we'll call this grapple obstacle, or obstacles. And then right after this, on layer 6 perhaps, I'm going to go ahead and give this the name of grapple points. Now, you of course may already be using these layers for something else, so if you want to change them, rename them, put them on a different layer, that's fine. But this way I've got them easily identifiable so that when I'm setting up my tile maps, my collision objects, etc., I can just find those layers by name in the layer panel. Okay, now that we've got our layer names, the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into our grass tile map, and I'm going to define and update this tile map so that it has some grapple obstacles. Now, in order to do this step, you're going to need the new asset. So if you've grabbed or downloaded that Abilities.zip file and unpacked it, we're going to find the file we need in there. So let me go ahead and bring that into the project first. And actually, to make that easy to find, I'm going to open up this grass tile map scene, because in here, I've got the grass texture attached. If I go to the tileset editor, and then I can see the texture here, and I can just show that in the file system. Okay, so this is where it's stored, tile maps, sprites. Let me open that in my file manager. And then I need to bring the new grass texture into this folder. So grab that Abilities.zip file, unpack it, and then we'll bring that new grass PNG in. Here's mine. I'm gonna go ahead and just drag it in and say copy over here. Voila. And now you're going to see that once this loads, I've got some new water tiles on here. I just threw these in. This isn't a fully fleshed way of doing the water, but this is the bare minimum that we need to make the feature work and kind of use to test in our little scene here. Now, in our tile set, we need to come to our physics layers, and we're going to need to add a new physics layer. So right now we've got this one that's set for walls, and we're using that obviously for anything impassable like a wall. But let's go ahead and add another element to our physics layers. So now we're going to have 2, and this next one I'm going to clear these, and this collision layer is going to be on layer 4, which is our grapple obstacles. And because we've defined that here, we can click on this little menu here and we can find our grapple obstacles. So if you didn't remember the number, that's why we give it those layer names. Okay, so now we've got a second physics layer that we can use while editing our tile maps. It's going to make it so that we can paint different types of collision shapes and objects into our tile set. So I'm going to go ahead and go over here to paint now that I've got that set up. And again, make sure you're on tile set, not tile map. Otherwise, you're not going to have these options. And then the property we want to paint is our physics layer 1. And just a full cube is just fine. I'm just going to zoom in and just paint those just like that. Now this last one, I could probably stand to drag these little collision shapes up a bit. So something like that, perhaps. I'm going to go ahead and click that in there. And then maybe likewise for this top one, maybe we want to drag the top down just a little bit. Boink. There we go. Okay, so we've got these set up. And now this physics layer 1 is flagged to be a grapple obstacle. Now this isn't going to quite work just yet because we haven't configured our player to collide with those. But let's go ahead and go back to our level here where we've been using this tile set. And let's create a little stream that the player cannot cross. So I'm going to simply just go into my tile map here. I'm going to select at least these top two here. And let me just get this rectangle tool, paint tool, and I'm going to paint that in. And then I just want this bottom edge here. I'm only going to make it kind of 3 tiles in height because I don't want it to be too big. And then I'm just going to real quick flesh out the rest of this map so it looks nice. Okay, there we go. I've got this new little piece of map. I've got this layer here. Let's go ahead and run the scene so you can see what this looks like. And you'll notice that the player can walk across the water, right? Because we haven't configured that yet. So let's go ahead and hop into our player scene. Go ahead and open that up if you don't already have yours open. And then I'm just going to select the player. And then because it's a rigid body 2D, I'm going to come over here and find the collision settings. And actually, I don't want the ones under character body 2D. I want this collision under the collision object 2D. And we can see that he is on layer 1 and he's colliding with layer 5, right? Which is our walls layer. So we can just come in here and turn on this grapple obstacles like that. So now he's got 5 and 4. And then if we come back to our scene and test this out, he should be stopped from walking across the water. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so now we've got a new type of terrain or collision object that we can use in our terrains that are impassable, but you'll see later on that we'll use the grapple hook to traverse it. So what I'm going to do is this time I'm going to open up my shop tile map scene. Now this scene here has a different tile set, right? It's got this house. And the only thing I really want grappleable is probably this door because just for fun, it's a wooden door, right? So why not make it so that it sticks? So let's do kind of the same approach. We're going to add a new physics layer. This time, instead of for grapple obstacles, we're going to add one for grapple points, and then we'll set it up on the tile set. Okay, so we're going to select our tile map layer. We're going to go to the tile set here. We're going to expand physics layers and add a new element. Now this one, we're going to turn off the settings that it had on, and we want to turn on the grapple points layer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and save that. Then what we can do is when we're editing our tile set, we can come over here to paint. We can select physics layer 1 because that's this physics layer right here. And now we can just paint in where we have grapple points that the player can shoot. And I'm just going to paint it on those 2 sections there. And in fact, you may want to, reduce the size of this collision shape like that. And so that it only covers the door, right? But there we go. So now if we look at physics layer 1, we've got it painted on the door. If we go to 0, we've got it painted just about everywhere, right? Because just about everything is a wall. So pretty straightforward. That's how we can set up a grapple point on our tile map. Now we're not going to be using the grapple point just yet. That's going to come into play once we actually start coding up the functionality for our grapple hook. But that's how we're going to set up that physics layer. Okay, now I want to set up this new grapple post. It's going to be an interactable object that the player can't walk through, but the grapple hook can also hit and grapple us too, okay? And now this object, we're going to create a new folder for this. So I'm just going to look for my interactables folder here in the project. And when we expand this, I'm just going to create a new folder. And we'll just call it grapple post or grapple point. I think post is good for this one. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and open this in my file manager because we need to bring some assets into this folder. So if you bring up the Abilities.zip file that you've unpacked, there should be this Grapple post. I'm going to just copy this into the folder here. There we go. Now we've got a new Grapple post sprite sheet that we can use. And we'll just create a new scene in this folder that we'll also call Grapple post. And make sure it's a 2D scene and hit OK. And there we go. So this Grapple post is going to be pretty straightforward. The first thing we're going to do is just add our sprite 2D so that we can display this new sprite sheet we brought in. And it's very straightforward. It's kind of small. And I'm going to go ahead and just kind of drag this up. It doesn't matter too much where the position is, but at least that's where the bottom of the post will be when I'm dragging it around the map. And in order for this post to work, we need some static bodies. We need one that acts as a wall collision layer so the player can't walk through it. And then we need another one that has a grapple point physics body on it. So we'll add the first. And I said static body, right? Static body 2D. And of course, our static body 2D needs a collision shape 2D. And we're going to simply add a new rectangle shape to this. And I'm going to go ahead and shrink it down to a small size because really the player should be able to walk fairly close to it. Now, this static body 2D, we need to go into the collision settings and just put it on layer 5 only, right? Which is our walls layer. Now, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this static body 2D, and this will be our grapple point static body. So I'm going to change the name. It's not really necessary to change the name, but it'll help us identify it. And then I'm going to come in here to the collision shape. And before I change any settings, I'm going to say make unique. Otherwise, it's going to share settings with that other collision shape we have. And now all I really want to do is just make this a little bit larger. Now this is going to be the area that we can grapple onto. And so I'm making it a little bit larger so that it's forgiving because this is a pretty small post and I don't want the grapple hook to miss it too easily. Okay, so then we've got that set up. Let's go into our static body 2D collision settings. And obviously this one we want to be a grapple point and not a wall. Okay, there we go. Now, when we go to our level, let's go ahead and just drop a couple of these grapple posts in here. We don't need a script on this because it's not going to be doing anything that requires a script. All of that work is going to be handled by the grapple hook itself. So I'm just going to place this somewhere. We don't want it to be right next to the water because we need the player to cross the water completely. So I'm going to stick it over here. And I'll just duplicate this and offset it to the right and drag it down. And there's our grapple post on the other side of the little stream. So now we've got this little simple obstacle set up. The player can't cross this, right? And if we had the grapple hook, we could grapple onto it, hopefully, and shoot across to the other side. And then we've got post on this side as well so that we can get back, okay? Now, maybe you want it to only work one way, right? This is just up to you for level design, but you can see how we're going to utilize this little feature here. The next thing we want to do here is set up our player so that we can kind of build the grapple hook feature into it. But this is going to require some assets, obviously, right? And so I want to spend a little bit of time going over how we're going to set that up. And we're going to be doing something a little bit different here too. We're going to be using a 9-patch rectangle style node, which inherits from control, which is normally used in UI, but it serves the purpose that we need for this grappling hook really well, and it works. So we're going to go ahead and do that. But let's begin by going over to our player. And I'm going to go ahead and just open him in the file system so I can get in there. And we need to bring some assets into the player folder, right? We've got an additional sprite and some sound effects and things like that that we're going to bring in. So let me go ahead and open the sprites folder in the file manager. And then let's go ahead and go into our abilities download file. And what we're going to want here is we're going to want this grapple PNG. I'm gonna go ahead and copy and paste that in here. Okay. And then I'm going to just work through the Explorer here. And I want to find next this audio folder because I've got several audio sound waves that we're going to bring in. We've got a grapple chain, clang, grapple fire, and grapple stick. I'm going to just bring these in here to this folder. And we're going to be using all of those sound effects for the different effects that our grapple hook will make. Okay, we've got those loaded in. We're good to go. Now let's talk about how we're going to add this to our player. So it's going to be a node just for the grapple hook, and it's going to contain this 9-patch rectangle that I mentioned. It's going to need some things like an audio stream player as well. And then once we begin hooking up the functionality of the grapple hook, we're going to be adding some other things like ArrayCast 2D and things like that. But for right now, I just want to set up the visual for this grappling hook and show how it's going to work from a visual standpoint. So in the player here, I'm going to just collapse everything. I'm going to add a new node 2D, and this is going to hold all of our grapple hook features, or at least the ones that we've been discussing. So I'm just going to call this grapple hook, and I'm going to make it accessible as a unique name so it's easier to work with in our code. Right now, this is just an empty node 2D, but let's go ahead and add this 9-patch rectangle. And you can see the description. It's a control that displays a texture by keeping its corners intact, but tiling its edges and center. And so we've kind of used this, I guess, in our UI, but we're going to be using it in a different way here. This 9-patch rectangle needs a texture, and it's going to be this Grapple PNG that we brought into our project. Okay, so there we go. Now, one thing that's happening with this is that it's scaling the texture to fit the box by default, and we obviously don't want that. So let's get everything configured how we need it. And the first thing we can do is we can come in here and we can set our region rectangle, and it's 32 by 32, the whole thing, so that's good. But what we want to do is drag these little lines down, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. We want one that begins right where the chain leaves the grapple hook, and one right before the hook begins. So this little area here, what that means is we're going to repeat this area, and then the hook and the handle will just not repeat or stretch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. So once we've done this, if we look at our patch margin, you can see we've got a top and a bottom margin on that. If we had left and right, this would work left and right as well, which is something that we set up in our UI elements that we've done this with. But because we haven't, it's stretching left and right. So we need to size this box to the correct size so that we don't have that stretching. And one thing we can do is, you see our axis stretch here. Right now it's stretching both. Like you see how it's stretching the middle piece. We want to set our vertical to tile. Now it's not stretching. And in fact, if we change the horizontal to tile, it's going to get rid of that stretch. And then it doesn't matter too much how big this is, unless of course you don't want 5 grapple hooks. But I'm going to go ahead and just drag this down like so. Okay, and you can see if I look at the layout, I had just adjusted this. So layout, transform, it's 32 pixels wide. So that fits the width of the texture. And everything looks good now. And so what's cool about this is you can see we've got this grapple hook. When it's small, the hook is kind of like just barely sticking out of the handle. And when we make it long, then the chain just repeats. Okay, so we're going to use this. So basically what we're going to do when we set up the grappling hook is we're going to animate the height of this texture, or this 9-patch rect, and it's just going to extend the chain. Just like that, okay? Now, everything else we're going to do with this grapple hook is mostly going to be done through code. And so we can just kind of get this in here and position it. We're not going to use the animation player to make any special animations for this. Now, you could if you want to. I didn't add any animations for firing the grapple hook or for when the player is kind of, using the grapple hook and whatever. I don't know what you call that, like gliding with it. I don't know what you call it. Somebody needs to help me with words for that. Maybe I should ask ChatGPT, but we're going to use code for a lot of these things because we're going to make it variable how far the grapple hook goes, and we don't want the grappling hook to always extend the same distance, because if it hits a wall or something like that, then we want the grapple hook to stop animating and go back. Now, we could do a lot of this with the animation player as well, but in my opinion, using the animation player adds complexity to this problem that we're trying to solve. And so I think using a code-only implementation is going to be a little bit better in the long run. Now, I suppose the last thing I do want to do, though, in here is let's take our grapple hook, and I'm actually going to grab the grapple hook node 2D. I'm going to drag it out so I can just see this. There's just a lot of junk happening up there. I'm going to take this 9-patch rectangle, and I want it to be centered kind of like so. So we can see here's the origin of the grapple hook 2D node, and I've got my 9-patch rectangle centered there. This way it's easy. I can just move. Now I can just move this where I want the grapple hook to be, and I'm not going to be adjusting the position of that 9-patch rectangle. And what's cool about this is if we rotate this, then the grappling hook rotates, okay? And so we're going to get our rotation from that. So when he's facing to the side, we'll just rotate it by negative 90 degrees or positive 90 degrees, right? Depending, and 180 degrees for facing backwards. And that's going to make it easy to do that. We don't need our side and up and down animations for it. We'll just kind of hijack the idle animation maybe. And then we can just take this node and just move it into place. For now, I'm going to move it roughly to where his hand is, okay? Now, ideally, I think this grapple hook should come right out of the center of the player. So we could do that as well. And maybe we will just for sake of communicating where it is to the player. And the reason we're going to do this is you'll see when we implement the code, we're going to use a raycast. So we're going to just shoot a tiny line straight forward and see if it collides with anything. Okay. And so maybe having it come from the center, while it looks goofy because we don't have an animation that fits that, this is more intuitive for the player. Okay. So I'm just going to look at the position of this real quick. We've got a 0 on the x-axis and a negative 15, it looks like, on the y, which I think is okay. Maybe it could be further down, something like that. But either way, this is going to work. I'm just going to set it here at negative 14. I'm going to go ahead and save, and we're going to call that good. Okay, now, of course, if we run the game, then we're going to run into some goofiness because now as we run around, we're going to have this little grapple hook, okay? But we're going to fix that when we start hooking up all of the code for this feature. Well, there we have it. Short and sweet, this video, but we've gone ahead and created all of the basic pieces that we need so that we can actually play with and test our grappling hook, right? Because if we didn't add these things, then when we started coding the grapple hook, we'd have to keep stopping our work, adding a new asset, setting it up, and then going back, okay? So this way we should have the majority of the things front-loaded that we're going to need. So in the next video, we'll build that grapple hook functionality, we'll do all the code, and we'll play around with it. So stick around for that. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe if you want to see what's coming next. And as always, we'll see you next time.